The crisp, unforgiving air of the Russian winter of 1942 to 1943 bit deeply, chilling bone and spirit alike. For 3 long years, the grand ambitions of Germany had driven its armies across vast stretches of Europe, achieving victories that reshaped maps and expectations. From the Channel Coast to the heart of the Soviet Union, the momentum had seemed almost unstoppable. Yet, as the calendar turned toward the close of 1942, a different kind of reality began to settle over the battlefields, and indeed, within the command centers far from the snow-swept steppes. The war, once a rapid forward march, was slowly, but undeniably, beginning to change its character. Deep in the vast expanse of the Eastern Front, an immense and brutal struggle was unfolding for the city of Stalingrad. This industrial hub on the Volga River, bearing a name of profound symbolic weight, had become the focal point of a strategic German offensive launched months earlier. The goal was to secure the oil-rich Caucasus and sever the Soviet Union's vital river supply lines. By late summer, German forces had reached the city, engaging in some of the most intense urban combat history had ever witnessed. Buildings became fortresses, streets became death traps, and the fight devolved into a grim, house-to-house, room-to-room grind. The German Sixth Army, under General Friedrich Paulus, was at the heart of this prolonged agony. In November 1942, a decisive Soviet counteroffensive, codenamed Operation Uranus, launched from the north and south of Stalingrad. Their forces, moving with unexpected speed and coordination, managed to punch through the thinly stretched German flanks, primarily defended by Romanian and Hungarian units. Within days, the jaws of the pincer movement closed, encircling the entire German Sixth Army and elements of the Fourth Panzer Army within a vast pocket, known as the Kessel, in the ruined city and its immediate surroundings. Approximately 250,000 Axis soldiers were now trapped, cut off from resupply and direct support. For Adolf Hitler, ensconced in his distant headquarters, the initial reports of the encirclement were met with a blend of disbelief and stubborn resolve. He had always held a firm belief in the unwavering commitment of his soldiers and the strategic brilliance of his overall direction. The idea of a major German army being completely cut off was a severe blow to this conviction. Yet he insisted that the Sixth Army hold its ground, promising resupply by air and a subsequent relief effort. The promise of an airlift, however, quickly proved impossible to fulfill adequately. The Luftwaffe, despite heroic efforts, could not deliver the thousands of tons of supplies, food, fuel, ammunition, medical provisions needed daily to sustain an army of that size in the bitter winter conditions. Aircraft were scarce, airfields were distant, and the Soviet air defense was increasingly effective. As the weeks dragged on into December and then January, the grim reality became ever more apparent. The promised relief attack, spearheaded by Field Marshal Erich von Manstein, struggled to advance through the fierce Soviet resistance and the brutal weather, ultimately falling short of reaching the trapped army. Inside the Kessel, temperatures plummeted, often to -30 degrees Celsius or lower. Soldiers, many without proper winter clothing, began to succumb to frostbite, starvation, and disease in increasing numbers. Ammunition ran low, fuel for tanks and vehicles became a memory, and the sick and wounded piled up in rudimentary aid stations. The once proud Sixth Army was slowly but surely being consumed by the elements and the relentless Soviet pressure. The moment of profound realization for Hitler wasn't a single instant, but rather the cumulative, undeniable weight of unfolding events. It was the increasingly desperate pleas from Paulus, initially confident but growing increasingly despairing, that could not be ignored. It was the confirmation, week after week, that the airlift was failing, the relief columns were stalled, and the casualty lists were growing to unimaginable lengths. It was the stark military fact that an entire German field army, 250,000 men strong, was simply vanishing, being systematically destroyed. When Paulus, against Hitler's explicit orders, ultimately surrendered the remnants of the Sixth Army on February 2, 1943, it marked a turning point of immense significance. This was not merely a defeat, it was a devastating strategic and psychological blow. The loss at Stalingrad broke the myth of German military invincibility. It was the first time an entire German field army had been utterly annihilated. For Hitler, this severe setback was the clearest signal that the war was not progressing as he had envisioned. The relentless, swift victories of the early years were over. The strategic initiative had passed to the Soviet Union, and the Eastern Front would become a grinding, defensive struggle for Germany for the remainder of the conflict. The hopes of a quick resolution or even a decisive defeat of the Soviet Union were irrevocably shattered. From this point forward, the war for Germany would be characterized by a desperate struggle for survival, a long and arduous retreat from the vast lands it had once so confidently occupied. The impact reverberated far beyond the high command. For ordinary soldiers and civilians across Europe, the news of Stalingrad, though often filtered and spun, brought a deep sense of foreboding. For the German people, it shattered a deeply held belief in their military's superiority and their leaders' infallible judgment. The dreams of a swift, triumphant conquest had given way to the grim realities of a prolonged and uncertain conflict. It was a stark demonstration that even the most powerful of forces can reach their limits, facing unexpected resilience and the harsh realities of vast distances and unforgiving conditions, forever altering the course of human events.